Good day, dear students. Today our lesson is devoted to the theme philosophy of mind. Let's consider the first part of our material about the subject of philosophy of mind. And let's begin from the definition of philosophy of mind. Philosophy of mind is an area of philosophical research of the nature of mental phenomena and their relationship with physical phenomena, so-called psychophysical problem, behavior and language, which have been developed in analytical philosophy since the middle of the 20th century. Philosophy of mind is a trend that studies the nature of consciousness and the problem of relationship between the body and human psyche. And the subject of philosophy of mind is the nature of mental phenomena, the nature of consciousness, as well as the relationship between consciousness and physical phenomena. Let's consider main questions of philosophy of mind. They can be divided into three groups: the descriptive questions, the explanatory questions, and functional questions. The descriptive question is: what is consciousness? What are its principal features? And by what means can they be best discovered, described, and modeled? The explanatory question is: how does consciousness of the relevant sort come to exist? Is it a primitive aspect of reality? And if not, how does or could consciousness in the relevant aspect arise from or be caused by non-conscious entities or processes? And the functional question: why does consciousness of the relevant sort exist? Does it have a function? And if so, what is it? Does it act causally? And if so, with what sorts of effects? Does it make a difference to the operation of systems in which it is present? And if so, why and how? The second part is about the main problems in philosophy of mind. The first problem is the problem of the nature of consciousness, the central problem. Understanding of the nature of consciousness is one of the most difficult problems that science has had to face. Although the roots of philosophical consideration of the issue go far back to antiquity, the development of biology, psychology, and neurosciences allowed philosophers, on the one hand, to expand the boundaries of their discipline, and on the other hand, to pose new tasks for representatives of natural science areas. One of the main methods of philosophy of mind is thought experiment. It allows you to run an experiment when the conditions or the hypothesis itself are so complex that it is virtually impossible to implement empirical testing. Most of the questions in philosophy of mind are just such. The second problem is the explanatory gap, so-called explanatory gap. It is a concept introduced into the discussion of consciousness by the philosopher Joseph Levine in his article Materialism and Qualia, the explanatory gap, in 1983. The gap in explanation is that no theory of the physical realization of consciousness in the brain, using only natural science terms, cannot eliminate the feeling that something remains unexplained. There is more to our concept of pain than its causal role. There is its qualitative character, how it feels, and what is left unexplained by the discovery of C-fiber firing is why pain should feel the way it does. For this seems to be nothing about C-fiber firing which makes it naturally fit the phenomenal properties of pain any more than it would fit some other set of phenomenal properties. Psychophysical problem and options for its solution. The psychophysical problem is the problem of the relationship between the mental and the physical. Various options for solving this problem in European philosophy are proposed. For example, René Descartes formulated the theory of psychophysical interactionism, the mechanical effect of the body on the soul, and the reverse effect on the body with volitional effort. The second example is representatives of occasionalism denied the natural character of the interaction of body and soul and considered the direct actions of God to be the source of soul-body interaction. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz proposed the doctrine of an independent parallel course of physical and mental processes, the coherence of which is initially provided by a pre-established harmony. The conception of epiphenomenalism proposed by Thomas Huxley, consciousness as a function of the brain, as an epiphenomenon that arises at a certain stage of evolution, and etc. Analytical philosophy can discuss psychophysical problem. And at the beginning of the 20th century, representatives of logical positivism who put forward a program of reducing the language of psychology to the language of physics considered mental and physical only as the different ways of describing and ordering experimental data. In line with this understanding, the mind-body problem or the mind-brain problem has become one of the central issues in analytical philosophy. In philosophy of mind, various options were formulated for reducing the phenomena of subjective reality or perceived states to cerebral neurophysiological processes. For example, the identity theory of the mental and physical within the framework of scientific materialism, and etc. Psychophysiological problem as a version of the main question of philosophy. The psychophysiological problem is a particular version of the philosophical psychophysical problem associated with the analysis of the relationship between matter and consciousness. It can be solved only by physiological or psychological methods, although the results of their application can contribute to philosophical analysis. The heart problem of consciousness. This problem, the heart problem of consciousness, can best be formulated as follows. How mental states in their qualitative aspect relate to their corresponding neural processes, and why do they exist in connection with these processes? The above questions can hardly be exhausted by empirical methods. Of course, experience can convince us of the truth of the general thesis that the brain gives rise to consciousness, but these will not remove the heart problem, but only concretize it. How and why does the brain generate consciousness? The next problem is the problem of qualia. Feelings and experience vary widely. For example, I run my fingers over sandpaper, smell a rose, feel a sharp pain in my finger, seem to see bright purple, become extremely happy. In each of these cases, I am the subject of a mental state with a very distinctive subjective character. There is something it is like for me to undergo each state, some phenomenology that it has. Philosophers often use the term qualia, singular qualia, to refer the introspectively accessible phenomenal aspects of our mental lives. In this broad sense of the term, it is difficult to deny that there are qualia. Disagreement typically centers on which mental states have qualia, whether qualia are intrinsic qualities of their bearers, and how qualia relate to the physical world, both inside and outside consciousness. The understanding of the status of qualia is central to a proper understanding of the nature of consciousness. Qualia are at the very heart of the mind-body problem. The term qualia is used in philosophy mainly in the English language analytical philosophy of mind to denote sensory phenomena of any kind. This concept was introduced by the American philosopher Clarence Irving Lewis in 1929. Qualia is an unfamiliar term for something that could not be more familiar to each of us, the ways things seem to us. Qualia are qualities or sensations, properties of sensory experience, such as redness or pain, and are considered separately from their effect on behavior, as well as from any physical conditions that may have caused them. As Erwin Schrödinger said, the sensation of color cannot be accounted for by the physicist's objective picture of light waves. Could the physiologist account for it if he had fuller knowledge than he has of the processes in the retina and the nervous processes set up by them in the optical nerve bundles and in the brain? I do not think so. The status of qualia is one of the most widely discussed problems in modern philosophy, since it serves as a key to understanding the nature of consciousness. And we can distinguish the main antinomies of consciousness. For example, internal consciousness or immanent consciousness and external or transcendental consciousness, individual consciousness and supra-individual consciousness, symbolically mediated consciousness and directly or immediately experienced consciousness. Let's consider the immanence of consciousness. My consciousness is something deeply immanent. This is my consciousness, my intimate being, which keeps the innermost secret of my individuality. No one else in the world, no alien consciousness can directly penetrate into the inner life of my I. No one can read it like an open book and roughly judge my aspirations, sympathies, and thoughts. Consciousness as an immanent being protects me from the invasion of alien I. On the other hand, these alien consciousnesses are also unique, self-valuable, and autonomous. Each of them is in itself the most impenetrable and unique monad, only by an act of its free will, which opens itself from within itself to another monad and accordingly reveals this inside itself never completely transparent being. Let's consider opposite feature, transcendence of consciousness. My consciousness is at the same time something transcendental, super personal, because only through it this is possible for me to feel and realize the presence of other things and the inner life of consciousnesses, different from my own. Only thanks to consciousness I am able to overcome my bodily boundaries and prejudice of selfhood, to feel my deep essential connection with other people and involvement with the whole world. And there are such rare moments of existential experience of unity with all that exists when a person feels himself or herself to be a particle of universal consciousness, a manifestation of a single world soul. The view of the mental life of man as a part of the world soul was already developed by Plato and the Neoplatonists. In the Christian tradition, man is recognized as the image and likeness of God, and his individual consciousness is seen as rooted in the infinite transcendental divine consciousness. Let's consider the second pair or second antinomy of consciousness, subjectivity and temporality of consciousness. My consciousness is something subjectively temporal, existing in the form of an irreversible and irreproducible stream of images, associations, and memories that I will never be able to convey to anyone absolutely adequately, just as I cannot hope for an authentic entry into someone else's subjectively temporal flow. This view of consciousness as a continuously renewing being, which is essential in a permanent process of formation, is already indirectly present in the ancient tradition in Heraclitus and especially in his disciple Cratylus. In modern European philosophy, in Henri Bergson and William James, consciousness as a stream of waves or fields that arise in our head, in our consciousness. In modern Russian philosophy, this is Merab Konstantinovich Mamardashvili. Objectivity and timelessness of consciousness. For my eye, in its being, there are also objectively supertemporal ideas, values and images archetypes, as if hovering above the element of my temporal experiences and unconditionally existing as such in someone else's consciousness. Thanks to them, I am not only subjectively aware of something, but also objectively I know and experience in the same way with other eye. If the antinomy transcendental immanent characterizes primarily the form of experiences of consciousness, whether they are personal or impersonal, then the pair of categories subjective-objective reveals the dialectics of the content of our experiences. Symbolically mediated consciousness. My consciousness is something deeply symbolically mediated, first of all by natural language. Thanks to symbolic structures, as they are mastered in ontogenesis, my inner psychic world acquires order and significance, as it would be humanized, with the help of sign symbolic systems of various natures. I can make the content of my consciousness available to another conscious being, and in turn understand it. Finally, personal experiences being objectified in a scientific text, a piece of music, or in a painting, or in an object of material culture, are able to experience myself as if pushing the temporal and spatial boundaries of my physical existence in the world. Immediately experienced consciousness. My consciousness is something directly experienced and not grasped in any symbol. These are inner states of mind, anxiety, sympathy, emotional uplift, and acts of creative enlightenment and tacit empathy for the other eye, and anticipations about their future, and finally a feeling of love which has never been managed by anyone to capture adequately in symbolic form. In a word, the existence of my consciousness just as needs symbolic mediation and objectification, as it naturally avoids them, being something deeply immediate in its essence. Let's consider, let's review the main trends in the philosophy of mind. We can distinguish two main big trends in philosophy of mind: metaphysical theories of consciousness and specific theories of consciousness. General metaphysical theories of consciousness offer answers to the conscious version of the mind-body problem. What is the ontological status of consciousness relative to the world of physical reality? The available responses largely parallel the standard mind-body options, including the main versions of dualism and physicalism. Metaphysical theories of consciousness include monist theories of consciousness, namely idealistic and materialistic, and dualist theories of consciousness. Dualist theories regard at least some aspects of consciousness as falling outside the realm of the physical, but specific forms of dualism, differing just which aspects those are. And specific theories of consciousness are theories that investigate various mental and other psychic abilities. That is, not only cognitive abilities, but also, for example, control over emotions. 7 main types of theories may help to indicate the basic range of options. Higher order theories, representational theories, interpretative narrative theories, cognitive theories, neural theories, quantum theories, and non-physical theories. Let's consider metaphysical theories of consciousness. And namely, we will pay attention to types of dualism. Substance dualism, this is the first type of dualism, such as traditional Cartesian dualism, asserts that existence of both physical and non-physical substances. Such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds or selves as entities in which consciousness inheres. Though substance dualism is at present largely out of favor, it does have some contemporary proponents. The second type of dualism is property dualism. Property dualism in itself, several versions, enjoys a greater level of current support. All such theories assert the existence of conscious properties that are neither identical with nor reducible to physical properties, but which may nonetheless be instantiated by the very same things that instantiate physical properties. In that respect, they might be classified as dual aspect theories. They take some parts of reality, organism, brains, neural states or processes, to instantiate properties of two distinct and disjoint sorts, physical ones and conscious, phenomenal or qualitative ones. Dual aspect or property dualist theories can be of at least 3 different types. Fundamental property dualism regards conscious mental properties as basic constituents of reality on a pair with fundamental physical properties such as electromagnetic charge. They may interact in causal and law-like ways with other fundamental properties such as those of physics, but ontologically their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative from any other properties. Emergent property dualism treats conscious properties as arising from complex organizations of physical constituents, as doing so in a radical way such that the emergent result is something over and above its physical causes and is not a priori predictable from nor explicable in terms of their strictly physical natures. The coherence of such emergent views has been challenged, but they have supporters. The next type is neutral monist property dualism, which treats both conscious mental properties and physical properties as in some way dependent upon and derivative from a more basic level of reality that in itself is neither mental nor physical. However, if one takes dualism to be a claim about there being two distinct realms of fundamental entities or properties, then perhaps neutral monism should not be classified as a version of property dualism, insofar as it does not regard either mental or physical properties as ultimate or fundamental. Panpsychism might be regarded as a fourth type of property dualism in that it regards all the constituents of reality as having some psychic or at least proto-psychic properties distinct from whether whatever physical properties that they may have. Indeed, neutral monism might be consistently combined with some version of panproto-psychism, according to which the proto-mental aspects of micro-constituents can give rise under suitable conditions of combination to full-blown consciousness. Next time is next big trend inside these metaphysical theories of consciousness is physicalist theories. And the first type of physicalist theories is eliminativist theories, reductively deny the existence of consciousness or at least the existence of some of its commonly accepted sorts of features. The radical eliminativists reject the very notion of consciousness as muddled or wrong-headed and claim that the conscious or non-conscious distinction fails to cut mental reality at its joints. They regard the idea of consciousness as sufficiently off-target to merit elimination and replacement by other concepts and distinctions more reflective of the true nature of mind. The next type is identity theory. Identity theory, at least strict psychophysical type identity theory, offers another strongly reductive option by identifying conscious mental properties, states, and processes with physical ones, most typically of a neural or neurophysiological nature. If having a qualitative conscious experience of phenomenal red just is being in a brain state with the relevant neurophysiological properties, then such experiential properties are real, but but their reality is a straightforwardly physical reality. The next type of physicalist theories is type identity theory. It is so called because it identifies mental and physical types or properties on a pair with identifying the property of being water with the property of being composed of H2O molecules. After a brief period of popularity of the early days of contemporary physicalism during the 1950s and 60s, it has been far less widely held because of problems such as the multiple realization objection, according to which mental properties are more abstract and thus capable of being realized by many diverse underlying structural or chemical substrates. If one and the same conscious properties can be realized by different neurophysiological or even non-neurophysiological properties in a different organisms, then the two properties can not be strictly identical. The next physicalist theory is functionalist theories. Functionalist theories in particular rely heavily on the notion of realization to explicate the relation between consciousness and the physical. According to functionalism, a state or process counts as being of a given mental or conscious type in virtue of the functional role it plays within a suitably organized system. A given physical state realizes the relevant conscious mental type by playing the appropriate role within the larger physical system that contains it. The functionalist often appeals to analogies with other inter-level relations, as between the biological and biochemical, or the chemical and the atomic. In each case, properties or facts at one level are realized by complex interactions between items at an underlying level. And the next type of physicalist theory is non-reductive physicalism. Non-reductive physicalism of this sort denies that the theoretical and conceptual resources appropriate and adequate for dealing with facts at the level of the underlying substrate or realization level must be adequate as well for dealing with those at the realized level. As noted above by me, in response to the how question, one can believe that all economic facts are physically realized without thinking that the resources of the physical sciences provide all the cognitive and conceptual tools we need for doing economic. And now let's consider specific theories of consciousness. And the first type of specific theories of consciousness is higher order theories. Higher order theories analyze the notion of a conscious mental state in terms of reflexive metamental self-awareness. The core idea is that what makes a mental state a conscious mental state is the fact that it is accompanied by a simultaneous and not inferential higher order metamental state whose content is that one is now in M. Having a conscious desire for some chocolate involves being in two mental states. One must have both a desire for some chocolate and also a higher order state whose content is that one is now having just such a desire. Unconscious mental states are unconscious precisely in that we lack the relevant high order states about them. Their being unconscious consists in the fact that we are not reflexively and directly aware of being in them. Reflexive theories, like higher order theories, imply a strong link between consciousness and self-awareness. They differ in that they locate the aspect of self-awareness directly within the conscious state itself, rather than in a distinct meta-state directed at all. The idea that conscious states involve a double intentionality goes back at least to Brentano, 1874, in the 19th century. The conscious state is intentionally directed at an object outside itself, such as a tree or chair in the case of a conscious perception, as well as intentionally directed at itself. One and the same state is both an outer directed awareness and an awareness of itself. Several recent theories have claimed that such reflexive awareness is a central feature of conscious mental states. Some view themselves as variants of higher order theory, while others reject the higher order category and describe their theories as presenting a same order account of consciousness as self-awareness. Representationalist theories. Almost all theories of consciousness regard it as having representational features, but so-called representationalist theories are defined by the stronger view that its representational features exhaust its mental feature. According to the representationalist, conscious mental states have no mental properties other than their representational properties. Thus, two conscious or experiential states that share all their representational properties will not differ in any mental respect. Narrative interpretative theories. Some theories of consciousness stress the interpretative nature of facts about consciousness. According to such views, what is or is not conscious is not always a determinate fact, or at least not so independent of a larger context of interpretative judgments. The most prominent philosophical example is the multiple drafts model, MDM, of consciousness, advanced by Daniel Dennett in 1991. It combines elements of both representationalism and higher order theory, but does so in a way that varies interestingly from the more standard versions of either, providing a more interpretational and less strongly realist view of consciousness. The next type of specific theories is cognitive theories. This is a number of theories associate consciousness with a distinct cognitive architecture or with a special pattern of activity with that structure. For example, global workspace. A major psychological example of the cognitive approach is the global workspace theory. As initially developed by Bernard Baars, global workspace theory describes consciousness in terms of a competition among processors and outputs for a limited capacity source that broadcasts information for widespread access and use. Being available in that way to the global workspace makes information conscious, at least in the excess sense. It is available for report and the flexible control of behavior. Much like Dennett's cerebral celebrity, being broadcast in the workspace makes contents more accessible and influential with respect to other contents and other processors. At the same time, the original content is strengthened by recurrent support back from the workspace and from other contents with which it coheres. The capacity limits on the workspace correspond to the limits typically placed on focal attention or working memory in many cognitive models. The next cognitive theory, attended intermediate representation. This theory have been proposed by Jesse Prince in 2012. Attended intermediate level representation theory is a neurocognitive hybrid account of conscious. According to this theory, a conscious perception must meet both cognitive and neural conditions. It must be a representation of a perceptually intermediate property, which Prince argues are the only properties of which we are aware in conscious experience. We experience only basic features of external objects such as colors, shapes, tones, and feels. According to Prince, our awareness of higher level properties such as being a pine tree or my car keys is wholly a matter of judging and not of conscious experience. Hence, the intermediate representational aspect of to be conscious, such as represented content, must also be attended. Prince proposes a particular neural substrate for each component. He identifies the intermediate level representations with gamma vector activity in sensory cortex and the attentional component with synchronized oscillations that can incorporate that gamma vector activity. The next theory is information integration theory. This theory is very famous now, and it describes the follows. The integration of information from many sources is an important feature of consciousness. and is often cited as one of its major functions. Content integration plays an important role in various theories, especially global workspace theory. However, a proposal by the neuroscientist Giulio Tononi 2008 goes further in identifying consciousness with integrated information and asserting that information integration of the relevant sort is both necessary and sufficient for consciousness regardless of the substrate in which it is realized, which need not be neural or biological. According to Tononi's integrated information theory, consciousness is a purely information theoretic property of systems. He proposes a mathematical measure phi that aims to measure not merely the information in the parts of a given system, but also the information contained in the organization of the system over and above that in its parts. Phi thus corresponds to the system's degree of informational integration. Such a system can contain many overlapping complexes, and the complex with the highest phi value will be conscious according to this theory. Now let's consider neural theories. Neural theories of consciousness come in many forms, though most in some way concern the so-called neural correlates of consciousness. Unless one is a dualist or other non-physicalist, more than mere correlation is required. At least some neural theories of consciousness must be the essential substrates at least some neural correlates of consciousness must be essential substrates of consciousness. An explanatory neural theory needs to explain why or how the relevant correlations exist. And if the theory is committed to physicalism, that will require showing how the underlying neural substrates could be identical with their neural correlates, or at least realize them by satisfying the required roles or conditions. Such theories are diverse not only in the neural processes or properties to which they appeal, but also in the aspects of consciousness they take as their respective explananda. Some are based on high-level systematic features of the brain, but others focus on more specific physiological or structural properties, with corresponding differences in their intended explanatory targets. Most in some way aim to connect with theories of consciousness at other levels of description, such as cognitive, representational, or higher order theories. Quantum theories. This is our other physical theories, and they have gone beyond the natural, have gone beyond the neural and placed the natural locus of consciousness at a far more fundamental level, in particular at the microphysical level of quantum phenomena. According to such theories, the nature and the basis of consciousness cannot be adequately understood within the framework of classical physics, but must be sought within the alternative picture of physical reality provided by quantum mechanics. The proponents of the quantum consciousness approach regard the radically alternative and often counterintuitive nature of quantum physics as just what is needed to overcome the supposed explanatory obstacles that confront more standard attempts to bridge the psychophysical gap. Again, there are a wide range of specific theories and models that have been proposed, appealing to a variety of quantum phenomena to explain a diversity of features of consciousness. And non-physical theories. Most specific theories of consciousness, whether cognitive, neural, or quantum mechanical, aim to explain or model consciousness as a natural feature of the physical world. However, those who reject a physicalist ontology of consciousness must find ways of modeling it as a non-physical aspect of reality. Thus, those who adopt a dualist or anti-physicalist metaphysical view must in the end provide specific models of consciousness different from the five types above. Both substance dualists and property dualists must develop the details of their theories in ways that articulate the specific natures of the relevant non-physical features of reality with which they equate consciousness or to which they appeal in order to explain it. A variety of such models have been proposed, including the following. David Chalmers in 1996 has offered an admittedly speculative version of panpsychism which appeals to the notion of information not only to explain psychophysical invariances between phenomenal and physically realized information spaces, but also to possibly explain the ontology of the physical and itself derived from the informational, a version of it from bit theory. In a somewhat familiar vein, Greg Rosenberg has proposed an account of consciousness that simultaneously addresses the ultimate categorical basis of causal relations. In both the causal case and the conscious case, Rosenberg argues the relational functional facts must ultimately depend upon a categorical non-relational base, and he offers a model according to which causal relations and qualitative phenomenal facts both depend upon the same base. Also, as noted just above, some quantum theories treat consciousness as a fundamental feature of reality, and insofar as they do so, they might be plausibly classified as non-physical theories as well. Thank you for your attention.